Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be talking about the French and Indian War, how it ends, and some things that come afterwards that lead to growing discontent among the colonists in regards to British rule. So in 1756 and 1757, French General Louis Joseph de Montcalm destroyed British forts on Lake Ontario and Lake George. Meanwhile, American Indians raided British frontier settlements in Pennsylvania and Virginia. The tide of war shifted in 1758 and 1759. The British managed to cut off French shipping to the Americas. As a result, many American Indians deserted the French in favor of the better supplied British. This allowed the British to capture Fort Duquesne. The British also seized the key French fortress of Louisbourg, which guarded the entrance to the St. Lawrence River. That victory cleared the way for General James Wolfe to attack the stronghold of Quebec in 1759. In a daring gamble, Wolfe's men used the cover of night to scale a cliff and occupy the Plains of Abraham just outside the city walls. Marching out to attack, Montcalm suffered defeat and death. So this is kind of the battle that is the end of the French and Indian War. The Quebec was kind of the capital, it was the stronghold, and whenever Quebec falls, that signals the end of the war. In 1760, the British captured Montreal and forced the French governor-general to surrender the rest of Canada, including the forts around the Great Lakes. The British had succeeded in their major North American goal. So this is sort of a major victory for the British. They have won this war, they have defeated the French, and it is going to shape the coming years in the New World. So, in 1763, we have an updated map here. The purple area on this map is the British territory, and the green is the Spanish territory. Also, the orange is the French. And if you look in what is today the United States, you do not see any French territory. The only French territory is this little bit down here in the Caribbean. So, after 1763, it is all Spain and Britain in North America. Well, in modern day United States, I should say. The Treaty of Paris, 1763. Fighting continued in other parts of the world. The British also won major victories in India, the Philippines, West Africa, and the West Indies. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris ended the war triumphantly for the British, who kept Canada, the Great Lakes region, the Ohio River Valley, and Florida. They had driven the French from North America. Thereafter, the Mississippi River became the boundary between British and Spanish claims in North America. Pontiac's Rebellion. The conquest of Canada was dreadful news to American Indians of the interior. No longer could they play the French and the British against each other. Indeed, the British military commander Lord Geoffrey Amherst quickly cut off delivery of goods to American Indians. British settlers flooded onto American Indian lands in western Pennsylvania and Virginia. So, the Native Americans had been playing the French and British against each other. You know, they had been kind of switching back and forth on sides and just seeing whoever would give them the better deal. And if one side offered a better deal than the other, well, they would go to the other side. And then go back and forth, and just kind of playing them against each other. Just going to whoever could give them the best deal. And this had worked out for them for a long time, but whenever the French had been driven from the land, well, they were kind of stuck. So, this becomes pretty a stressful time for the Native Americans. Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa rallied a number of groups of American Indians against the British in 1763. So, we're going to talk about Chief Pontiac. The American Indians affected included the Mississauga, Ottawa, Potawatomi, Ojibwa, Wyandot, Miami, Kickapoo, Mascoutin, Delaware, Shawnee, and Seneca. During the spring of 1763, members of these groups surprised and captured most of the British forts in the Ohio River Valley and along the Great Lakes. Through the summer and fall, they also raided settlements in western Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia. The British called this uprising Pontiac's Rebellion, after an Ottawa chief named Pontiac who organized an attack on Detroit. The goal of the American Indians was to weaken the British and lure the French back into North America. But they failed to capture the three largest and strongest British posts, Detroit, Niagara, and Fort Pitt, formerly Fort Duquesne. So this is Pontiac's Rebellion. It shows where all of these attacks were. If you see the white mark, that is where a British fort was and was captured. The red sort of explosion icon there are where the British victories were. So as you can tell, the Native Americans were really taking over these forts at a pretty rapid pace. So this was a series of victories for the Native Americans. Proclamation of 1763. During 1764, the American Indian attackers ran short of gunpowder, shot, and guns. Without a European supplier, their rebellion fizzled. At the same time, the British government sought a quick end to the expensive war. The Crown blamed Amherst for the crisis, recalling him in disgrace. Thomas Gage, the new commander, recognized that respect for the American Indians would cost less than military expenditures against them. So, the Native Americans, they run out of guns. They don't have a way to make guns and shot and gunpowder and all of that themselves. They had been relying on European suppliers for that, and whenever the Europeans cut them off, well, they couldn't use guns anymore. And whenever it comes down to guns versus bow and arrow, well, I think you know which weapon is going to win out in that battle. So this rebellion is going on, and this new guy comes into command, Thomas Gage. And he realized that if he can make peace with the Native Americans, that's going to cost a lot less than all of this military expense. The various American Indian nations made peace in return for British promises to restrain the settlers. The British rebuilt their forts, but they also tried to enforce the Proclamation of 1763. This document ordered colonial settlers to remain east of the Appalachian Mountains. So, Proclamation of 1763 comes out, and it says that they don't want any settlers to go past the Appalachian Mountains. Once again, that's our area. That's where we're talking. So, you can't go west. You have to stay on the eastern side of the mountain range. Seems simple enough, right? Well, here is a excerpt from the Proclamation of 1763. And whereas it is just and reasonable and essential to our interest and to the security of our colonies, the several nations or tribes of Indians with whom we are connected and who live under our protection should not be molested or disturbed in the possession of such parts of our dominions and territories as are reserved to them, or any of them as their hunting grounds. So this is saying that we're not going to attack and we're not going to intrude on territory that is designated as theirs. The British troops, however, were too few to restrain the thousands of colonists who pushed westward. Troops burned a few log cabins, but the settlers simply rebuilt them. It was clear that the boundary set by the proclamation could not protect the American Indians. At the same time, it irritated the colonists, who resented efforts to limit their expansion. So, Proclamation of 1763, it was nice in theory, but it was not easy to enforce, and people were largely ignoring it. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is the Albany Plan of Union. This is going to lead to the Albany Plan of Union. Disagreements with the British colonies. The French and Indian War, as well as Pontiac's Rebellion, revealed the tensions between the British and their colonists. After investing so much blood and money to conquer North America, the British wanted greater control over their colonies. They also had a large war debt, plus the expensive job of guarding the vast territories taken from the French. The British thought that colonists should help pay these costs, and likely so. They said, we paid all this money, we fought this war to protect you, well, you should help pay for the cost of the war. We fought the French for you. We are protecting you from the natives. You should have to pay some of this debt. And that was the British stance on this. That is not going to go over well. Bickering between the colonies had also complicated the war effort and had angered the British. With British encouragement, colonial delegates had met in 1754 to review the Albany Plan of Union. Drafted by Benjamin Franklin, the plan called on the colonies to unite under British rule and to cooperate with one another in war. It created an American Continental Assembly that would include delegates from each colony. However, none of the colonies would accept the plan for fear of losing some of their own autonomy. So, Benjamin Franklin, another guy you should keep in mind. He's going to come. He might come back here in just a little bit. He called to unite the colonies together. He wanted all of the colonies to join together under this plan to make a more united front. None of the colonies accepted this plan, however, because they were afraid that by entering into this agreement, they would lose some of their own ability to make their own decisions. The British also dropped the plan, fearing that creating greater unity among the colonies might make them more difficult to manage. So the colonies didn't like this plan because they thought they would lose some of their decision-making ability. The British didn't like the plan because they thought, well, if we get all these people to join together, they might be more difficult to manage. So let's let them bicker between each other, because if they don't trust each other, they're going to be a lot easier for us to control them. During the 1760s, the British acted on their own to impose new taxes and new regulations on colonial trade. Those changes angered colonists who wanted to preserve the sort of loose empire that had for so long produced so many benefits at so little cost to them. So, the British are going to enact a lot of taxes and regulations on trade in the colonies. Like I said, the idea for these taxes and these regulations was to help pay some of the war debt that the British had incurred during the French and Indian War. They fought to protect the colonists and to protect their territory. Why shouldn't the colonists have to pay for some of this? It was fought on their behalf, and it's kind of hard to not see their point. The colonists were the ones who got the benefit from the French and Indian War. They should have to pay for the war debt. So, in the coming sections, we are going to see what sort of impact these taxes and regulations have, and it's going to lead to the American Revolution. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. I hope everybody's having a great day, and I'll see you again real soon.